I don't know about you guys or where you live, but there has been a horrible flu going around in my area, and your girl caught it this week, and if you can hear it in my voice, after the flu that I had for a few days, I was left with a chest infection and a sinus mess. So we're gonna ignore all the redness and dryness happening, and I'm probably gonna be sweating this entire video. Yeah. But we got some real life drama. These are your stories. I'm on my deathbed. We're off to a great start. All right, this person wants to be left as anonymous. I have used fake names for all parties involved. You can call me Delilah. Okay, so bear with me, this will be long. I was unhappily married with my kid's father. We'll call him Aaron. It had turned into a relationship of convenience and comfort. He cheated on me throughout the entire relationship, and although I knew about it, I never caught him. I stayed because I've always had very low self-esteem. The reasons for that are a very long story. Aaron and I played a very popular MMORPG. It's a type of computer game. I'm not familiar with that, but you guys might be. It was the type of game that kind of becomes part of your daily life. Most regular players dedicate many hours a day, to grinding, completing daily quests for gold and materials to make items. At this time, we had 2 children, an older boy and a younger girl. He spent so much time playing that game that eventually I tried playing to be a part of his world and to spend time with him. At first, he did actually spend time teaching me how to play, and I'd finally found a way to feel worthy of his time. Eventually, I got very good at the game and spent a lot of my days grinding in the game. Too much time, really. Looking back at it now, there were other things I probably should have been doing, but hindsight is always 20/20. Aaron did work at the time, and his employment provided our housing. Eventually, he moved up the ranks at work, and we moved to a nicer space. We really were never healthy for each other, but we were too young to know that at the time. Young love, we've all been there. Aaron quit his job around this time. We had agreed that I would stay home and he would work once he got this job because childcare is too expensive, and I would be doing low-skilled work that would only pay for childcare. We got into a very big, very bad fight the day he quit that job. It was my birthday. He started playing the game and not looking for work. I was very stressed. We sold everything we owned during that time just to pay the rent. I had become very stressed, unhappy, and lonely. My feelings at the time do not justify my decisions. I played the game a lot on my own and eventually made friends of my own there. This is where I start to feel stupid telling the story. I started talking to a guy, we'll call him Joe. It was just platonic at first. Eventually, though, it morphed into me getting the attention I always sought out and feeling kind of good about myself. It turned into a relationship. I felt valued for the first time in my life. I made plans with Joe to move in with him. He lived in a different state with my kids. Wow. He had a son same age as mine, so it seemed perfect. Eventually, Aaron found out about what was going on. I came clean, took our kids, and left. That was we flipped a page and we're in a new book. Joe drove all night after work one night to come pick up my kids and myself to move in with him. I know my faults in this decision. I didn't leave the right way. Hey, as long as you can admit it, all right? You know, accountability accounts for something. I left in probably the worst way possible, but I was angry, lonely, and I wanted Aaron to feel pain. I started all over again, which was very normal in my life before with Aaron. I thought this time I was doing it for the last time. Joe and I made a life together. Eventually, Aaron also moved on, and I was really happy about that. He met a woman, Katie, the same way I had met Joe, and she was great for him. We finally had the best relationship we ever had. Aaron, Katie, myself, and Joe were raising the kids together with several states between us. Okay, I'm so happy that you guys are able to co-parent for the kids' sake. Joe and I had lived together for several years and eventually got married, as did Katie and Aaron, and I made sure the kids were there for their wedding and had nice clothes. We were all relatively happy, I thought. Before Joe and I married, we shared a cell phone for quite a while. This is right around the time smartphones came out, and with both of us working the same low-skilled job at the same place, but different shifts, and 3 kids between us, we could only afford one. We had a landline as well, so whoever was away from the house took the cell. One weekend when I was working and I had the cell, I went to text someone. I think it was my mom or my sister. I noticed that all the text messages had been deleted, which can usually only mean one thing. Hate to burst your bubble. When I spoke with Joe, I asked about it. He said that the phone had been running slow and was alerted that it was running out of space. Okay. When he had it during the week, so he got rid of some stuff so it would run better. I have a sneeze. I have to hold it. If I sneeze, oh my God. Look at me. I look like I'm crying. Look at my face. Guys, I'm so violently ill. I took this at face value. That wasn't really an uncommon thing at the time, so it made total sense. That actually does make sense. Especially old phones at the time, the storage would fill up so fast and text messages actually took up so much of that space. It was super annoying. During the week at some point, he mentioned getting back in touch with some people from high school. The next weekend, I went to work. It was the same thing. All the texts had been deleted. I asked Joe about it again and he gave me the same answer. I fought back a little, saying that was the excuse that he had before, so it doesn't make sense this time. He said he thought he needed a new phone because it was malfunctioning. I was skeptical, but not concerned. We spent all our time together other than when we were at work. Our physical life wasn't struggling and he was quirky. Throughout the next couple weeks or months, he was talking about a girl, Sarah, he had gone to school with that he had gotten back in contact with. Oh, excuse me. She was married and he was wanting me to agree to have them over for dinner. He insisted that I would like her. The same thing happened again with the phone a few weeks later. I had been putting two and two together and let him know that I suspected it was conversations with Sarah. He dismissed that as ridiculous. Eventually, she faded out of conversation. Everything went back to normal. A few years went by. We had a lot of trouble with our son's custody, a legal fight with Joe's mom and us. There were allegations, oh no, of abuse by me on my stepson. They were untrue and a judge saw that. Shortly after that, Joe and I got married. I had married Aaron for all the wrong reasons, but this time I was marrying Joe because I was in love. Less than a year into the marriage, 9-ish months, Joe asked if we could help a friend of his with childcare. I didn't work during the week, so we wouldn't have to pay for childcare for our kids. So he wanted to know if I would watch his friend's kids while she looked for a job. Is it gonna be Sarah? Is this gonna be Sarah? He had explained to me that Sarah's husband, how did I know, had gone to jail or prison and she was desperately looking for a job but needed help. I was hesitant. I'd never met Sarah at this point, but I agreed. I watched Sarah's 2 terrible kids every day for about 2 weeks for free while Sarah was going for job interviews and whatever. I only stopped because she found a job. All right, guys, I need to hop on hydration station personally because my throat. I'm dying. So hopefully you're not sick. This is more a reminder to drink water so you don't get sick. Cheers. Although clearly it didn't work for fucking me. The following week, Joe sat me down and told me he was in love with someone else. Well, who could that be? My world broke into a million tiny pieces. I honestly wasn't sure what to think and I was trying to figure out how to fix whatever I did wrong. For those thinking that I deserved it for what I did to Aaron, I don't disagree with that completely. In fact, while I went through this over the month or so, Aaron and Katie became my people to lean on. I told Aaron that if this is how I made you feel, I am so sorry. He and Katie agreed that it is okay now, and if it hadn't been for that, they wouldn't have met. Guys, this is Joss from the future. I just want to put a trigger warning that coming up in this story, we do get into the topic of suicide, so I want to put the trigger warning out there for anyone who might need it. Okay. I went through a period of begging Joe to change his mind. I cried literally all the time, and I was trying to figure out how to be a mother when my whole world was falling apart. At some point during all of this, I tried to not be living anymore. Well, hey, even if I don't agree with cheating by any means, I don't think that you don't deserve to be here just because you made a mistake. So I'm happy that you're still here. Okay? And you stay here with us. We're all friends here. We all can't leave each other. We're vowing to each other, all right? That's a whole horrendous event on its own. By this time, Joe was mad at me. I still don't know why he would have been mad at me. I just needed some understanding, but I didn't get that. Certainly not from him. While I tried to stop my life, Joe made my oldest child, my son, keep me awake until the ambulance got there instead of him doing it. I agree that my son witnessing that was ultimately my fault, but I still believe he should have done it, not tell my son to. Yeah, that's pretty traumatizing for a child. While I was in the hospital, a lot changed. Aaron and Katie came and picked up our 2 kids because I wasn't in any shape anymore to take care of my kids. Before this happened, I had put in my 2-week notice at work. I wanted to work that because I was going to have to find work when I left and I needed the reference. Also, I can admit now that I didn't want to leave my home or my husband. While I was in the hospital, Joe came in to yell at me and tell me what had happened didn't change anything. Well, isn't he nice? It was not a cry of help. I genuinely did not believe in my ability to function properly for my kids anymore. I truly thought they would be better off. I was mad that he stopped me. There's a reason you're still here. I finished off the 2 weeks. It was just Joe and me in the house. I didn't eat and constantly got sick to my stomach. I left all the material things. Joe did tell me I could take what I wanted, but I didn't want materialistic things. I've never been that type of person anyways. I wanted my life back. I did manage to get Joe to drive me the 5 hours to my mother's house when it was time for me to leave. I found out years later that Sarah and Joe's mother were moving Sarah and her kids in while he was driving me. I knew something was going on with Sarah. I spent a very long time recovering. Ultimately, Aaron, Katie, and I decided it would be better for our kids to live with them. I didn't have much recent work experience and I was emotionally broken. It would have been selfish for me to keep the kids. I still don't know if that was the right decision, but it's the only one I had to make. Joe continued to string me along after I moved away. He would call and say Sarah was crazy and that he missed me. Also, side note, how have I not mentioned how insane it is that you were watching Sarah's child and she was getting with your husband? So, kudos to Sarah for that too. I was trying so hard to figure out my life and I let him pull me back in several times over the next several months. I was very weak. Then he would block me on all platforms again. He changed his number the day after dropping me off at my mother's house. Sarah would occasionally email, text, or DM me on various platforms, telling me my life was hers now and to move on and leave her man alone. Oh, please. But it's like, if you got a man through cheating, like, are we really gonna brag? Like, that's my man. That's my man. Cheat on his wife with me, everybody. That's my man. You can have him. You can have him. I have moved on now. All of that happened a little more than 10 years ago, but I wasn't a whole person until 4 or 5 years ago. I had to learn how to be independent. I'm now remarried to a wonderful, sweet man that acts like the world revolves around me. I have a career that I love and my kids are now young adults. It was a fight for many years to get a divorce from Joe. Well, hey, we are all human, and putting the mistakes made aside and the hard choices you had to make, I really am glad that you are still here, and I think that you're here for a reason. And look how your life's played out. That has to show you that you're here for a reason, that everything that happened that day was for where you are now. You had to get to this point, and you get to live a happy life. That part makes me very happy. This next story comes from Olivia. This is a long one, buckle up. Y'all know the drill. We're buckled. He wanted to abort my baby before okay. Oh my God. Am I gonna cry? God, my sinuses cannot handle me crying. Before I start this, I'd like to give some background. I live in Europe where in most countries it is illegal to have an abortion. And in where I am, you can abort under certain circumstances. I'm not sure of the details of this, but that's my understanding. I was with this guy for 6 months and I was on birth control. I later found out that no matter if you're on birth control, if your hormones are higher on any given day, you can still conceive. My midwife told me this. So I was seeing this guy, we'll call him Jacob, for 6 months. He lived an hour away and we would see each other most of the time, either him staying in my house or me staying at his. At first, everything was fine and I couldn't have been happier. Then I met his aunt, who's not his aunt, but basically raised him because his father was working or busy with other women. After meeting his aunt, who, by the way, the whole time I was there, spoke nothing but Polish to him, and sometimes English so I could understand. not knowing I could understand some Polish. Keep in mind. Ooh. The country I live in, Ireland, is predominantly English speaking. When we left his aunt's house, I was a little overstimulated from my brain picking out the Polish words. I could understand and translate them, so I was a little quiet in the car. This began the never-ending cycle of when I was quiet, he would say, "Why are you always so moody?" Love when someone asks me that. Because I am. I brushed it off so we wouldn't have an argument because, again, I was an hour away from home with no idea how I would get back to my country. County. Jocelyn. Okay, I'm struggling, clearly. This went on for months. Then, 2 months into the relationship, again an hour away in his house while doing the deed, he slapped me across the face. I did not expect this moment. I froze, but didn't say anything. A few weeks later, before Christmas, I went to a bar with my best friend since he was at home and I had no other plans. He made me promise to be home by 10 p.m. What are you, my father? I said I'd be going home when the bar closed at 12:30. He put up a fight being an hour away and working the night shift. He couldn't really do anything. My friend's boyfriend took half an hour to drop us home, and Jacob did not like this. He started ringing me and texting me, shouting at me to get the F home now. I ignored him and eventually I got home. I told my mom what happened and she said to try to talk about it tomorrow because tensions were high. I agreed and went to my room. That's when he called me twice again, so I answered and said, "What do you want?" He said, "Wow, I was just calling to make sure you were home okay and to tell you my grandmother has passed away in Poland." I was shocked and instantly regretted snapping at him. We talked and he said I need to change my attitude or we're done. I stupidly agreed and he got off work at 7 a.m. and drove over to my house to sit down and talk about the night before. We sorted everything out and he drove back home. Fast forward to my birthday 2 weeks after Christmas. I asked some friends over to have some drinks and celebrate my 21st as COVID was still a thing in 2022. Oh, so you're young. Okay. That just might help with some of the behaviors. Especially from this man. He also came down for my birthday. He surprised me by coming down and got pissed off when I wasn't so surprised to see him because I knew with how he was acting that he was up to something. He then threw a tantrum that I was drinking because he doesn't, or so I thought. We'll get to that later. He insulted my friend, calling her a whore because she was single and talking to two guys. Something she'd never done before. So he ruined my birthday. This is explaining the early 20s thing because as an adult, you learn not to tolerate that behavior. A few weeks later, everything went back to normal, or his normal, with his sly comments and betchiness for a few weeks. We spent the last week of January together that year, and then he was busy with work, so we didn't see each other that much. Fast forward to the 9th of February when I came across a girl in my People You May Know, and who was a mutual with Jacob. I clicked her profile to see if I knew her. I did not, but noticed that she worked in the same company as him and lived in the same area as him. I bet those are like light bulb flashes just going off. Radar. We'll see if I'm right. I then saw he love reacted to her profile photo and my heart fell out of my ass. As crappy as he was to me at times, there was a lot of good times, and I loved him with all of my heart and soul. He was supposed to be working that night, so I knew that he would be able to answer me if I rang. And he hadn't texted me back for 2 hours. So I rang, no answer. I rang again, no answer. At this point, I am hysterically crying and thinking the absolute worst, as we do sometimes. Sometimes I put a whole scenario up here and it hasn't even happened yet. Anxiety. I rang again with no answer. Then he rang me back. Clearly he was walking because I couldn't hear the engine of the van, but footsteps instead. He asked what was wrong, and I, in that moment, convinced myself I was overreacting and said, "Oh, nothing. I was just making sure you were okay." Haha. Then he said, "No, what's wrong? You wouldn't be effing blowing up my phone to see if I was okay. You never call me unless something's wrong." So I got angry at this point from his tone and said, "Who the F is Annie?" He said, "What?" So I repeated myself. He got really angry and told me that I'm psychotic, and if I think he's cheating, there's something wrong with me, and that we were done, and hung up the phone. I found out a year later that he was out with Annie that night, had left her in the car to call me back, and told her that he was talking to his dad. Of course. He came to my house that day after to get his stuff and give me back the key to my house. He looked me dead in the eyes and told me I'm a psychotic lunatic and that I need help. That he's been nothing but nice and caring to me. He didn't deserve how I treated him. Me being 21 and naive, I begged for him to stay with me and that I would get the help he's talking about. He said no and told me to get out of his car, and he left. I was shattered. Young heartbreaks are the worst, especially because they're some of the first, and it really feels like your life is over. It really does. I think we can all remember our first heartbreak and your first time experiencing that. It's like, oh my God, like computer overload, like didn't know what the hell to do with myself. I called in sick to work the next morning because I was crying all night and I didn't want 100 questions from everyone in the office. I went to work the next day to be told I had to get on a video call with my new manager because she wanted to talk to me about calling in sick less than an hour before my shift and to get to know me. When I told you, I broke down crying to this woman and told her I had food poisoning the day before, which I was throwing up, but probably from crying so much, and that my boyfriend had broken up with me. She talked me round and let me get back to work. Oh, bless her. I spent the rest of the day randomly crying and just being a complete mess. Fast forward to Valentine's Day, I texted Jacob and told him I was thinking of him and that I passed my driving theory test that day. He said, good for you. And that was that. I was on the night shift that night, so I went to work. My coworker, who was at least 8 years older than me, had to listen to me crying and telling him everything. He was great, gave me good advice. Coming off the night shift, I felt sick like I did the week before. Red Bull smelled like metal, even though I love Red Bull. So I went home to sleep at 8 a.m. I woke up at 10:30 a.m. and something told me to do a pregnancy test. Ooh. Sure enough, straight away, it was positive. I was so in denial, I did 2 and digital, all positive. I started crying in panic. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I was keeping this baby, which Jacob knew what my stance was on the topic of abortion, pro-choice. But for myself, I wouldn't be able to do it. I texted him straight away with a photo of the test, and he texted me and said, that's fake. So I sent him a video of the test next to my face to prove I'm not lying. He rang me straight away and told me, get rid of it. Good news is, it's not your body. I don't want it, and neither do you. So I snapped back and said, absolutely not. You know my views on this. I'm keeping my baby. I eventually went into my mom's room and showed her the test. She was so happy, and I was still crying and confused even more about Jacob's reaction, which I now know why he was reacting like that. Because he was in a relationship with Annie just 2 days after we had broken up. Annie was 19 at the time and Jacob was 24. For a few weeks after, he was trying to get me to go see a doctor, a Polish doctor, to prove I was actually pregnant, but something told me not to do it. So I told him no every time he brought it up. I told him he can come to the scans, as it was his baby too. He came to the first scan, which was 13 weeks. That's when you get your first scan in Ireland. And he said under his breath in front of the midwife, there's no going back now. No. I pretended I didn't hear him and we argued the whole way back to my house. I didn't have much contact with him after that, only to send him things I wanted to get. Shocker, he only got one thing. And for things to have at his house for our baby. Fast forward around the 20-week scan, I told him in advance the date and time, and he decided to go home to Poland the same week. I accidentally found out the gender, so I asked if he wanted to know or did he want to wait until he's back in Ireland to find out, and he said, nah, just tell me. Very enthusiastic. So I told him we were having a boy. He was happy, and I told him to tell his father. I would come down to his house to tell him the gender, as that was his grandson too. He told me his father was on the way to my house and he had not told him the gender. His father was so happy that we were having a boy. He even brought a present for me and my mother. Well, that's sweet. That's the only sweet part of the story, to be honest. For the rest of my pregnancy, Jacob was busy with Annie, who apparently didn't like him coming down to me to go to the scans and didn't like him talking to me either. this was all lies. Okay, that's what he was telling you. Nearing my due date, I asked if he would want to be there for the birth of our son. I know I didn't have to do this, but it was our son that mattered, not him or me. He said he would like to be there, and he was. I unfortunately went into some sort of shock while in labor. We lost the fetal heart rate for a considerable amount of time, and I was losing consciousness also. Oh my God. Birth is my biggest fear. I'm not even joking. I'm not even being dramatic. Any person who has given birth, there has to be some kind of award you get. Besides the baby. I guess that's the biggest gift. But anyways, you're a hero. They ran me to have an emergency C-section. They were going to knock me out completely, but thankfully we both stabilized enough, so they gave me an epidural. Our little boy was born absolutely handsome with all 10 fingers and toes, healthy as anything. In the recovery room, Jacob asked if he could just go ring his father because he needed to calm down, seeing his face pale as anything. I said, of course. And off he went. He left me for 30 minutes. A year later, I found out that he had called Annie and told her he wished she was there. Because that wouldn't be awkward. She hung up on him. He had told me that he and Annie had broken up 2 weeks before, that I was due. I sympathized with him and left it at that. He left me in the hospital by myself for the whole day. The next day, because he had to work an hour away, because COVID was still a thing, no one was allowed to visit me, so I spent the whole day on FaceTime with my ma'am. He came back the day after and immediately started talking about us getting back together for the sake of our son. I told him if we were getting back together, it would be for us, not just our son. We eventually got home from the hospital after 3 or 4 days, and he said he still had to go work the next week to finish off his 2-week work notice before moving to my county to his dad's house to work in his dad's shop. I said, no problem. I had my ma'am, I wasn't worried. He stayed over to help with night feeds. I slept on the couch, recovering from a C-section, so that he could stay in my room with our son because the sitting room would be too cold for him. He spent the whole night texting me from upstairs and woke me up when I had just fallen asleep crying, holding our son because he threw up. I honestly felt sorry for him. We are both new to this, but we also both needed to learn. He never stayed again. He would make up excuses. Fast forward 6 weeks and I see Annie has looked at my TikTok page using a fake account with her name. Not so sneaky. I told him, this is weird, I'm gonna text her. He said, text her, it's nothing to do with me, so I did. He freaked out and started screaming at me. Annie blocked me and didn't reply. I found out that night that he was still in a relationship with her, and he was lying to me. So was his father, who multiple times told us we should get married, knowing he was with Annie. Great advice, Dad. I let it go for our son's sake. I stayed civil. He started making less and less effort to come see our son, and this went on for 2 months. Come February, here we go again with February. My God, that month is cursed for you. He came to see our son after a week and a bit of not seeing him. So I said, please, can you make some more time to see our son? He freaked out at me in front of our son, so I removed our son from the situation and asked my mother to mind him while we had this conversation. Although he was 3.5 months old, he could feel the tension. This is when Jacob threatened to kick something at me, then ran at me, and then threatened to punch me, all while screaming in my face, I am talking, shut the F up. Yeah. Not gonna fly with me. Absolutely not. Get that man away from you and your baby. I instantly remembered the night he slapped me across the face and took a step back from him. He did this all in front of my mother and my son. He told me he's not coming to my house anymore, then texted my mother that he will be up that coming Sunday to see my son, and he wanted me out of the house when he did. I was shaking from what just happened. Went to the guard station, police, and told them what happened. Because I was scared, they told me to go get a protection order so he could not come near me, and took a statement. I didn't want to press charges there and then because that's my son's father. He also told me to tell Jacob not to come to my house that coming Sunday because tensions were still high. I agreed and texted Jacob the next day, telling him not to come. That Sunday, he saw my messages around the time he was supposed to come to my house, and he never replied. So that Monday, I went to the court. I wrote out 2.5 A4 sheets of paper, everything he has said and did to me in the 1.5 years I knew him, and the judge granted my temporary protection order. I also had in the protection order that he could see my son and I would leave for that to happen. Fast forward to June, where we have the hearing for a permanent year-long safety order against him. He was told to just apologize to me on the stand and it would be over. He instead got on the stand and said, "Of course I was violent towards her. We were arguing." Bless any woman moving forward that has to deal with this man. He's dangerous. The judge stopped him and said, "No, what do you say?" And he said, "Oh, sorry." The judge said, "No, sorry to who?" He said, "Sorry, judge." And the judge said, "No, apologies to Miss Blank." So he turned to look at me. I didn't look at him. I stared at the judge with a straight face and he said, "Sorry, Olivia." The judge then, clearly annoyed with him admitting to being violent on the stand, granted a 1-year safety order and that if he wanted to see his son, he would have to apply to the courts for a visitation. He agreed and said he would file straight away. He didn't. My son is now 2 years old and hasn't seen or heard from Jacob since he was 3.5 months old. Jacob and Annie broke up in September of 2023 and she reached out to me and told me all the lies he told her about me and the court, but that's another story. Oh, and I found out as of a week ago from writing this, Jacob now drinks. Or he has the entire time. Who truly knows with this man's deceit? Sorry this was long, but I hope you enjoyed. I'm happy, healthy, and still healing from this ogre. I hope you have a wonderful new year and that 2025 is good to you. Olivia, I hope 2025 is good to you. And you're so young. And I hope we learn something from this relationship because you don't deserve that treatment. You truly don't. I'm so proud of you for keeping this baby, for being a great mom and, you know, protecting yourself and your son. And I'm wishing you guys, those were kisses. When I do this, I should probably just kiss. Like, what is this? Now you know. I hope you guys are doing well. Stay classy out there, y'all. Stay sassy. Stay healthy. Don't get sick like me. And I'll see you